I think they'll be a top 10 team in the world. It's pretty hard to outdo Carrigan though, because the thing is that Mouse before were like second in the world at points when Carrigan was playing with them. Was that last year or the end of 2019? I can't remember. But it's going to be pretty hard to top that. But I think what's most important is the fact that Dexter's already been with Mytha for a couple of months. And that's like a lot of chemistry that is already built up there. And IGL and coach being on the same page is like one of the most important factors.
Welcome back to another year, 2021, and it's Geographically Challenged to kick things off once again. We've had a bit of an extended break, but it is good to be back, the Three Musketeers. I've got Pili and Bleh here with me as per usual. And look, we've got a fair bit of catching up to do, gents. We haven't actually spoken in a while, or I guess I've seen Pili a couple of times. We've been taking our dogs to the park here and there. But Bleh, you know, it's been a while since we spoke to you. So how's things over in your neck of the woods? I know India just beat Australia in the cricket, so things must be feeling pretty good in that respect. I'm not feeling too happy about that, but anyways, you must be.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't followed cricket in like 10 years, but this was momentous, right? Test cricket. I used to love Test cricket and beating them in Gabba. Good stuff, good stuff. I didn't expect them to pull a win off like this. If only Indian Counter-Strike was even 10% as good as the Indian cricket team. That's right
exactly
now. I would be
what I was going to say.
I'd be a very happy man.
I was literally going to say, man, if only the Indian Counter-Strike players could do that. Pili, feeling a bit sick at the moment, so you might be a bit quiet today.
Yeah, look, I'll do my best. I'll struggle through it. At least we've got some interesting topics that I can try to blow my voice out, because it's not like I have to cast for the next 3 days anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point, and we'll talk about that when we get a little bit further on into the show, of course referring to Extremesland. But we want to start off with the hard-hitting topics, you know, the bangers to kick things off today. And look, I don't know really which one to start with. There's three pretty interesting topics that we're going to talk about. The first one I think we should probably go with is Alistair leaving Order. Now, the only reason I want to start with that is because it sort of follows on then into the Dexter to Mouz discussion, and the fact that Alistair leaving Order is actually the only one that is 100% confirmed, although from my assumptions, pretty much all of these are actually going to happen. So let's just talk about Alistair moving out of Order first. Obviously, the first question that is asked is then, where is he going to go? Now, if you've been living under a rock, you probably wouldn't have heard that Dexter is very likely moving to Mouz, but you put two and two together, you probably think, okay, Alistair's moving to Renegades. My first question, though, for you guys, and we'll talk about this whole Renegade situation when we get past this Alistair discussion, is who would replace Alistair in Order?
It would have to, I mean, I don't think there's a like-for-like replacement. If I was going to pick someone, I would probably pick acoR, or maybe like try and poach one of the Avant players personally. You can always throw Ricky on the AWP, so that gives you a little bit of flexibility in that regard. But yeah, I'd say Order, it's going to be very tough for them. They've lost a very, very strong player for them for the last couple of years. And even though Alistair's been a little bit inconsistent as of late, most of that inconsistency has come against Renegades. So if he joins Renegades, then it's like, well, who are you going to struggle against? I don't think there's going to be anybody.
Yeah, I have to echo just sentiments there. I don't think there's any clear-cut replacement coming in. I mean, this guy was what, our top 6 in our, you know, best 20 players of last year, I think.
I think he might have been 7. He was either 6 or 7, something like
6
that.
6 or 7, right? And the only one above him were some of the VG players and the guys from, of course, from Renegades as well. So yeah, a one-for-one replacement I don't think it exists right now, right in the region. He is by far the best player. Ricky being pretty solid as well as, you know, as a secondary AWP and whatnot. But yeah, just trying to replace him is going to be hard. I'm just assuming that Order got a very, very good deal for him. So yeah, like whoever's going to be joining, you know, Renegades, it's going to be definitely an improvement pure firepower wise. But yeah, I'm not sure which way they're going to go. I think acoR's a pretty good shout out, but I don't know, like, who is there out there who is of the caliber of this guy, apart from the players in Renegades right now?
I don't really think there is anyone. I just had a quick look as well, by the way, and he was number 6 for us. So 6th out of our top 20 for 2020. So, I mean, obviously a great pickup for whoever he ends up going to, whether it be Renegades or someone else. But on the Order point, and as a bit of an aside, I don't know if we really discussed it, but Gomez actually has joined Order as well as I think he's in a more of sort of a general manager capacity, but my assumption would have to be that he's doing a lot with the Counter-Strike team as well. Obviously, he's got those ties to Ricky and Ustillo already. He's obviously come back from overseas, so he has a lot of experience there. So he's probably someone that's going to be the guy that's doing a lot of that scouting for that roster to figure out, who should replace Alistair. I don't know if that really makes a difference as to who might get picked up. Obviously, he has some connections here and there. I don't think that it would make a huge difference. My gut feeling would probably be that I think maybe they do just put Ricky onto the AWPing role and they bring in a rifler instead of bringing in another AWPer. Because realistically, looking at it, where can you find an AWPer, a primary AWPer that is better than Alistair or Ricky in ANZ right now? That's not Xccurate or Sterling. I don't think you can find one. So, you can get a pretty decent rifler anywhere. I mean, not anywhere, but there are a lot of good riflers around. I don't think there's that many good AWPers that are going to be able to replace Alistair in that respect. So I think Ricky's probably the best option there. And, Ricky's been a primary AWPer in the past as well, so I wouldn't be too surprised to see him sort of step up and, again, take back that role. Obviously, we know that he used to be able to do pretty well. So that would be my theory. Anyway, I want to roll this into the discussion about Renegades because it all sort of seems to tie in together. Now, like I've said, my assumption is that Alistair is going to Renegades. Dexter is moving to Mouz. So there's a whole can of worms here to discuss what we think is going to happen with Mouz, what we think is going to happen with Renegades. I think let's start with the Renegades discussion and how we see Alistair sort of fitting in this Renegades roster. I know we were talking about this a little bit off air, Pilski, you and I briefly, and you were sort of raising concerns a little bit around the roles. I sort of said that I think at least from an outside of the Counter-Strike landscape kind of perspective, I think this is a good move. If you look at the friendship groups that are within AUCS, Alistair, Inns, Malta, they've played on teams together before. I think those guys get along really well with Alistair as well. So just from that specific standpoint and from the culture behind that Renegades roster that we always used to talk about with the mates and the boys. And I mean, it's not so much now with Renegades anymore. It used to be more of a thing when they were Greyhound. But I just think from that standpoint, this is a very good pickup for Renegades if they are picking up Alistair. But obviously it opens a bit of a can of worms roles-wise because Dexter, IGL, Rifler, and now you're bringing in an AWPer, a star player. It's a little bit of a role reversal for Alistair, at least from what he was doing on Order, right? It's not the same role for him as he was doing most recently, but it is going back a little while, and he's sort of done this kind of a role before.
Yeah, he was playing like an aggressive rifling role before, which is what's bound to happen, I think. I don't think Xccurate drops the AWP for Alistair when Alistair's a newer guy in the team. And also, I don't think I've seen Xccurate be a rifler at any point in his career, if I can remember correctly.
I don't think so, no.
Whereas Alistair's actually picked it up a couple of times and sort of dabbled in it. And he has actually shown some pretty strong performances on the rifle from time to time. It's just really a question of consistency and just being able to reinvent yourself again and change up your style to be able to become a really big asset. Because I don't think that it's a like-for-like replacement, obviously. You're losing your in-game leader. And then you're getting Alistair, who is not going to play the same way Dexter plays. Like, it's going to be pretty much polar opposite in a way. Like, he's a very aggressive player. He likes to make plays. He likes to take risks, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, because I think overall, if you look at the Renegades roster, you've got Hats, who is a bit more on the aggressive side of the scale as well, but he'll also just play his role and play the positions the way that they're meant to be played. And just sort of be a soldier in that regard. Whereas Alistair is a bit more of a playmaker, a bit more aggressive, and you've still got two players who are a bit more on the passive side of the scale, as well as Xccurate, who I think is a bit more passive. Sometimes I don't see him go for as much aggression as he used to in terms of peeking around with the AWP and just dominating the server like that. He's much more sort of tempered. He just takes the high percentages and plays for the team.
I think one benefit for Renegades is this will dramatically increase their ability to have a good double AWP setup, It's not something that they tended to lean to too often, but now it's definitely something that's in the ballpark, right? You've got Alistair, you've got Xccurate. Could see a bit of a change in their style just in that regard. I wouldn't be too surprised. But you sort of touched on it there as well, that they're losing an IGL Pilski. So that's, I think, another big factor for this Renegades roster. And I got to say, obviously, no disrespect at all to Alistair, but this is one of the worst things that could have happened to Renegades coming into 2021, right? They've gone through 2020. They've been stuck in ANZ for the whole year. They've been winning everything. They think, okay, great. 2021, time maybe to reset. Maybe we start to get going overseas again. in theory, we've only just added ins and hats. Like, they barely played any international events with Renegades since joining that roster. And then you come into 2021 thinking you're going to start to get the ball rolling. And all of a sudden, Dexter's getting poached over to Mouz. So, but I mean, obviously, they have to find a new IGL. What's your take on this? Dexter's kind of irreplaceable in that respect, right?
Yeah, it's rough, isn't it? But let's be real. Like, we all wanted, this Renegades lineup to play as unit that it is, the way they played last year, and for them to play, 2021, maybe once COVID thing dies down, to play a few lands. They impress all of us. They did impress all of us when they played that DreamHack Open earlier. I think it was Anaheim. No, it wasn't Anaheim. It was Leipzig, right? Mm-hmm. Where they reached the finals. There were heroic map lines, all those guys who were like, hey, 2021, the first land, they're going to qualify. They're going to kick some ass. It's going to be cool. Well, sometimes the reality can be rough. But from a fan of these guys, and especially for Dexter, it was a right call. For me, Dexter, if you get an opportunity to join a team like Mouz Sports, you fucking take it. You fucking take it. Don't think twice about it, right? So it was just inevitable that he was going to be picked up. I'm a little surprised that it was Mouz coming in. Of course, we can talk about it a little bit more later on, about Carrigan and the acoR situation and everything. But yeah, it leaves him in a rough spot. It is unfortunate. I'm not sure who the coach is right now. Do they have a coach?
Renegades or Mouz? Renegades doesn't have a coach, as far as I know.
Renegades. Yeah, Myther joined Mouz, right? So they don't have a coach. You've lost Dexter. It's gonna take, it's gonna be that period where they need to figure out how they're gonna play. It's gonna be very different, right? Losing Dexter is not just losing an in-game leader, but also losing, perhaps, at least in my opinion, your best player. Despite the fact that they have so many stars in that team, and he has that high output when it comes to firepower, which Alistair can definitely pick up the slack for since Dexter's going to be leaving. But at the same time, like you said, the lack of in-game leader, maybe Malta could pick it up. But I really feel having a coach, maybe even an analyst right now, a full-time analyst or a coach, would really be not just beneficial, but I feel like imperative for Renegades to kind of maintain their emperorship, so to speak, of ANZ Counter-Strike. So it's a little tricky, a little bit of a rough spot for the Renegade guys, apart from Dexter, of course.
It will definitely be a very interesting transition period. I have to agree. I think Malta has to be the one to take the reins here in the Renegade squad. That's the IGL. I don't really see anyone else being able to take that, as far as, you're not going to give it to Inns or Xccurate. I think they've got too much else to do. Hats probably isn't the kind of guy that is going to step up and take that IGL role. I think Malta's got a little bit of experience doing the IGLing as well. He was an IGL back in the day with Chiefs for a bit. So there is some precedent there for Malta, but again, obviously big shoes to fill for him. So I'm very interested to see how things are going to work for Renegades if he is to take over that IGL role. And I would echo your thoughts. I definitely think that getting a coach in, getting Myther in was really good for Renegades. I think that is very mumuch evident to anyone that was watching their games anyway. So if they can find another coach of that same caliber, or potentially even better, or even slightly worse, I think, than Myther, it's still going to be an asset to that Renegades roster. So for me, things are sort of falling into place. I can see the pieces of the puzzle coming together, but it's going to just be a question of how it all actually works in the server, right? We talk about on paper all the time, Pilski. You're very famous for saying Invictus Gaming on paper look like they might be the best Chinese team in 2020, and then they ended up not even being the best team in, half the events that they played in 2020. So they definitely fell off the radar. So from an on-paper perspective, I can potentially see this working for Renegades. I think they'll still be the number one team in ANZ. I'll just go out and say that. I don't think that anyone catches up with them. And, you've got to take into account the fact that they are taking the best player from their closest opponent in order, right? That is, I don't even know if that's a strategy or if it's just we wanted Alistair anyway. But strategically speaking, you're going to take the best player out of the team that is the only team that seems like they can beat you in ANZ. That's obviously going to be a blow for order, regardless of who they pick up. So overall, I still think that they take that first place position in ANZ going into at least the start of 2021. But does the gap close a little bit, Pilski? How big of a loss is Dexter if indeed he is going to Mouz?
I think the gap closes a bit. It's hard to say. Obviously, you have to remember, Order has to change up their team a lot as well. They've lost a very, very important piece. Both teams have lost a very important piece, and Avant is still sort of who knows what the hell's happening there. They're still juggling around players and doing this, that, and the other. So I think it's going to be a little bit tentative heading into this year and seeing some of the competitions coming up. I think Renegades will still be number one like you, but I think they'll just be a little bit worse than they were, and they'll have some bits of identity crisis creeping in perhaps.
Okay, all right. Well, let's talk about Mouz then, Bleh. I know you've been kind of itching to have a bit of a chat about that. If indeed Dexter does, as rumored, go to Mouz, how do you see that working out? And, just from like where everything sits, how's that sort of falling into place, right? Because to me, it makes a lot of sense when you look at it just holistically. Myth has gone straight to Mouz. He's gone, shit, Carrigan's leaving. I need to find an IGL. I've been working with Dexter for 6-9 months now. He's been really good. Myth has seemed to really respect Dexter when we had him on the Geographically Challenged podcast. You can go back and watch one of those episodes. I can't remember which number it was, but it was fairly recently. I'll put a link or something. He seemed to have a lot to say about Dexter. So in my mind, it's not a huge surprise that Mytha would try to get Dexter into Mouse Sports if indeed that is what's going to happen.
Yeah, from that perspective, it does make sense. I don't know, my audio is really low or something. It just
fine.
Stuck for me. It's not fine? All right, cool. The thing is with Mouz, right? Like, what he said makes sense, right? With Carrigan leaving, if he is going to be leaving, that's something I'm assuming is not within the control of Mouse Sports, right? It's Carrigan wanting to move on and do something else, which is, don't get me wrong, a massive, massive loss. Carrigan is someone who I respect. He's one of the greatest of all times when it comes to in-game leading, in my opinion. One of the best we have ever had in CSGO. So nothing against Dexter, but he is not going to be the replacement for Carrigan 1-for-1. You know what I mean, right? From a purely high-level IGLing standpoint, he's not that guy. However, that being said, he's not proven yet. So I'm just talking about this from a standpoint of the fact that Dexter hasn't really played the level of tournaments that Carrigan has in the past, 5-6 years. But he's an unproven entity, so to speak, for Dexter, at least when it comes to international scene. He's going to be playing with some very, very talented players. That excites me. And like you mentioned, with Myther being there, with the relationship they had going the past 9 months or whatnot, it's going to be way more easier for him to kind of slide into the role of IGLing. Second thing is Dexter is a mad fragger. Motherfucker's a mad cunt when it comes to the server and just, fragging heads, which is, again, nothing against Ben, but it is an improvement of Carrigan. So firepower-wise, you have a massive improvement when it comes to Dexter coming in. Now, with the addition of acoR, and this is us going a little bit off the Asian, Australian topic,
Sure.
but acoR coming in for Chris, this is something which I've spoken to a few other of our colleagues about, behind the scenes, and it's interesting because for me, Chris J, I agree that he has been really inconsistent. He always has been, in my opinion. But when he pops off, when he has his moments, when he has his tournaments, he is the one who gives them those land victories, right? Those big IEM wins and whatnot. He is that X factor, I feel, at times. And him going, I can't even remember when Mouse didn't have a Chris J, right? Maybe he was benched a couple of times here and there, but that's about it. So it's going to be very jarring, very interesting to see how it's going to play out. acoR is someone I've always had an eye on for a long time. And I think it's great for him to have a chance over here, considering, I think he's Swedish. He's Swedish, right? So there's nothing.
Danish.
Is he Danish? Of course he's
Fucking
Danish. Fucking Danes. Like, so many Danes. But acoR, it's good to see him going out. Apart from Astralis and, the couple of other teams, like Heroic, for example, the other Danish team seems to be kind of I wouldn't say lost, but kind of just floating around. And for acoR to get a shot with the team like Mouse, I think it's fantastic. It's a team, it's an organization that gives a lot of opportunities to kind of comparatively unknown players coming in. But the lack of an experienced, older voice, a veteran like Carrigan, I think that's going to be quite detrimental for Mouse, right? Because that's something they've always had, at least in the past couple of years when Carrigan had Wox and everyone around. So it's going to be a challenge for Dexter. Do I think he has what it takes? Absolutely. But is it going to be immediate? No. But I think this is the ideal scenario here. You get an IGL, get a mad fragging IGL. You have Myther, who had a relationship with him. You have new blood coming in the form of acoR. It's kind of like starting off kind of fresh. And I think that's a right call for Mouse to make here, considering it's just the beginning of the year.
Well, you talk about Chris J moving on. At the very least, Blair, there will always be a Chris on Mouse Sports. So we have to hope Dexter moves in to fill those shoes. I agree. I think Dexter can definitely fill those shoes. And, you talk about his experience and stuff. I think one thing to consider, and I'm not sure necessarily how relevant it actually is, is the time actually that Dexter spent in Winter Fox when he played overseas in North America. I did my in retrospect with him, and he sort of alluded to that time as quite an important period for him in terms of just learning about what he needs to be doing as a player, even as an IGL, and like how he would manage a team and that kind of thing. So in a way, like, it's kind of the same concept, right? He's an Australian player moving overseas, trying to make this new team work. And I just wonder if any of those experiences that maybe he had in North America might help him out. Obviously, we're now like 3 or 4 years later. He's a lot more of a mature person. He's a lot older, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I think he can make it work. I think this Mouz Sports roster could work if Dexter does go over. And, you know, I got to say, I wish him the best. Like, this is the first time that ANZ has actually exported an IGL as well. I think that's quite an exciting prospect, right? You have obviously Sponge and Azza, etc., who've gone over and played in 100 Thieves, but they've played within the Australian ecosystem still in a way, in that their teammates have all been Australia and New Zealand with some outliers. But this is the first time, you know, that we've seen a player who is an IGL go into an external team. Ricky was the first one.
Yeah, true. I mean, Bntet kind of to it.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I guess
not really an
that's
IGL,
Asia,
yeah.
But I'm talking ANZ specifically here.
Fair,
but
fair.
yeah, like obviously Ricky playing in CLG, Rogue, Complexity, etc., was the first Australian player to sort of spread their wings in that respect. But Dexter will be the first IGL, so that's quite a cool concept for me, because you almost look at the IGL and you say, okay, Mouz Sports is their team, 100 Thieves is their team. You know, in a way, like that's the way I look at things. So that's quite cool for me. Like he'll be a leader in that respect. Pilski, is there anything else you want to sort of throw in here for the Dexter to Mouz discussion, or any of that, what we've just been talking about before we move on to Bntet?
I think there'll be a top 10 team in the world. It's pretty hard to outdo Carrigan though, because the thing is that Mouz before were like second in the world at points when Carrigan was playing with them. Was that last year or the end of 2019? I can't remember. But it's going to be pretty hard to top that. But I think what's most important is the fact that Dexter's already been with Mitha for a couple of months. And that's like a lot of chemistry that is already built up there. And IGL and coach being on the same page is like one of the most important factors. And he's got so many, you know, talented players around him. I think there's even parallel in the way that some of the players play in Mouz versus in Renegades. Like I kind of look at how Inns plays, and it kind of reminds me a bit of like how Rops plays in some ways. And I kind of look at Hats, kind of reminds me of Frozen from time to time. So it's like some of the players play similar styles, and he's just got a lot of talented players in his arsenal. So I think he'll do good things, and I think they could be a top 10 in the team in the world pretty quickly. And I think acoR is a really good pickup as well. He's a really consistent AWPer.
All right. Well, good luck.
Also, just want to add as well the fact that if you look at the other players in Mouz right now, I mean, they are still young, but in Counter-Strike years, they have matured quite a bit, right? Like Pili mentioned, they were top 2, top 3 in the world like a year back. They know what it's like to play at high levels. But Dexter coming in is not just dealing with a bunch of some green around the ear kids, right? These are guys who know how to play Counter-Strike at a very high level. They have been properly trained and taught by Carrigan as well. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, I would be surprised if they're like outside of the top 10 by the end of the year.
Well, we wish them all the best. Specifically, Dexter and Mitha, our boys. Mitha, honorary ANZ member now after working for Renegades. Anyways, let's talk about Bntet, Bleh's favorite player in the whole wide world. He's moving to Extremum, or so the rumors would tell us. Now, geez, this is a shit fight, isn't it, right? Because, like, if we can follow what's happened for 100 Thieves, right? That roster obviously disbanded / left the 100 Thieves organization. There was discussions about where the core 3 was going to go. We knew Jacob was going back home. We knew Cassard was leaving the roster as well. They had I'm a Pet for a little while. And now it seems like everyone's coming back together, except for JKS, right? So the rumor has it that Cassard is coming back to Extremum. That's part of this discussion as well. The rumor has it that Jacob is rejoining with the 3 core of the ANZ roster as well. And now they're adding Bntet. So basically, in essence, it's 100 Thieves minus JKS plus Bntet. So obviously, how do we, like, this is almost the wet dream. The wet dream would be obviously JKS being involved as well. But at the end of the day, this is about as close as it's going to get to the Asia X ANZ super team that we were talking about, that we wanted, that we were sort of kind of keen to see. But now that it's potentially actually a thing, are we actually keen to see it? Do we actually think it's going to work?
I think you just pretty much nailed what I wanted to say. I'm torn in half because I would have loved. Oh fuck me! That would be so hard just seeing JKS and Bntet in the same server. I would be like erect as a motherfucker, but it is not to be. I'm still very happy because I still feel like that lineup had a bit to prove, a bit left to prove, right? Like they're going to be moving to EU right now. They're going to be still sticking around with Kassad. And I felt like, yes, they were stagnating a while ago. I'm talking about before, 100 Thieves, let them go and all of that. I won't lie, they were stagnating a little bit. It seemed a little lost. And maybe this is the kick they needed, right? They're going to be playing in AU. You have Bntet coming in. Can't deny the guy. I mean, he's played with with Audi, he's played with, of course, with Daps as well. He's grown, I feel, as a player, and I feel like it's the right time for Bntet to join this team. If you joined him earlier, it would have been different to be a raw Bntet coming in straight from Tyloo, the madness that is Asian Counter-Strike. Now he's more tenured in the scene, in the international scene. He knows what to do. He knows how to approach Counter-Strike better, and more importantly, even his comms, working with Elma, he's much better right now comms-wise, which is fantastic. So I feel I don't want to say he is an improvement of JKS or JKS would still be better than Bntet. I don't think that's the case over here. It's going to be how he fits into the team. But Kassad standing behind them, hopefully standing behind them, it should be interesting. I won't lie. I'm excited about his team. I feel like that they will have a little bit more damage to do before they call it a day, before they split apart. Jacob coming back as well for me is really cool. I feel like he was just wasted in Apex over there. I mean, nothing against them, but let's be real. He was by far the best player in that team, and it was almost like he was hard carrying the team. So yeah, he had his little adventure with his Norwegian brothers, but it's time to come back home, even though he's Norwegian.
It's just funny how it all sort of like, the whole thing about Jacob going back home was like, oh, okay, I'm kind of done now. I'm just going to go home and chill out and sort of foster Counter-Strike in Norway or whatever. And now it's just like, fuck it. Going back to the boys. And all of a sudden we have Jacob on 100 Thieves, not 100 Thieves. Anyway, Pilski, you're doing some thinking. I can see your eyes looking up in the air. You're just, So what have you got to say on this topic? Because I'm sure there's a fair bit. You always like to talk about roles and whatnot, so lay it on us. Why is it not going to work?
It's not going to work, but it's not going to work. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Okay, it's I'm going to say the same thing about this roster as I'm going to say about Extremum. Sorry, not Extremum. NG Esports is that, like, it's the same thing again, almost. So I think they're going to be about as good as they were before. And towards the end of that Renegades team, they were not playing so well in NA. They were a little inconsistent. And I think there's a bit of a skill cap, especially when it comes to those big lands and things like that, unless some of the firepower of the individuals starts to step up a little bit. I think, you look at players like Liaz and Grat and stuff like that, at least in our region, we've seen, and Bntet as well, for example, we've seen them absolutely pop off. We've seen them have like massive firepower performances and be some of the best players in their region, and even seen maps of brilliance like that when they've been overseas playing international competition. But the consistency isn't there. And when they play in this 100 Thieves core with like Kassad and some of the other boys, it's almost like their performance is muted. And I think that's partly just because they're playing against a high level of opposition. And I think it's also partly because of the system that operates, within that 100 Thieves roster. They definitely play team Counter-Strike. They try to play the high percentages. And I think with that, there comes a limit of individual freedom to some extent. And you do have to try to play for the team all the time. And I think that's what other teams in the top 10 do really well, is that, yes, they have their system, but they also have individuals who know how to play make and stuff. I look at the Extremum roster. I look at a Bntet who's in Gen G. Yes, he's learned how to play better for the team. He's learned how to play roles better and communicate better and things like that. But he's not multi-fragging as much as he used to. He still clutches from time to time. I look at Grat, I look at Liaz. These guys aren't dropping the same level of firepower that they used to, is basically what I'm getting at. So I think that 100 Thieves is, again, at their height with the system functioning very well and with some big individual performances on top. I think, yeah, okay, they can reach the same heights that they did before. But I think it's going to be the same thing again, like streaks of inconsistency. There's going to be, like, they just play so many close games as well. Like, every game you ever see of 100 Thieves, you're strapping yourself in for like a 16-14 or a 14-16. That's all it is. They never get smashed, and they never smash anybody. So
I do have to wonder, why Kassad would come back. That's like another thing that has just really interested me. If that's true, because it seemed like there was a What
They
do I
weren't
want to
watching
say?
demos. They weren't watching demos.
Yeah, there was just like a bit of friction. Like from the outside, I've got no inside information on this situation at all. But from the outside, it just seemed like maybe there was some friction between him and the team, just in terms of the way that the team wanted to operate and the way that he wanted the team to operate, and what he expected of the players and what the players kind of wanted to do, or whether they wanted to kick someone or whether they didn't want to kick someone, I think was mainly the thing. He sort of went with the discussion of whether or not the team needed an upgrade, and they seemed to think that, okay, well, we can just keep going with what we've got. And now he's back with more or less the same thing. JKS is gone. Like the jewel in the crown is gone. It's been replaced with Bntet. Yes, he's a good player, but is that enough to entice acoR to come back to this team that he has left twice or 3 times now?
It's like imagine acoR's the kind of like a patriarch of a family, right? And then he's got like one of the kids. He's probably doing meth. He's not happy about it, and life's not doing good, even though they were a happy family once upon a time. So he leaves the family, and he's like, fuck this shit. And he travels around the world and joins another family called Cloud9. And there he figures out, nothing's working out there. And he remembers like the good times, the happy times, despite the one meth head probably being the team. I'm not saying JK is a meth head over here. It's just, it's a very, very terrible analogy, but just go with this, right?
It's a Bleh analogy.
Yeah, and then he comes back, and it realizes, you know what? It wasn't that bad anymore. Anyway, like these are the small little issues we can fix. And you have a new kid in the family, and this kid's like a prodigy. He's like a year old, is already like reading Latin and fucking spitting bars in ancient Greek or something. And he's Asian as well, but he's Polish at the same time. You're like, fuck. I got a new kid in the family. I got to go back. I got to be the patriarch again. I can see why, small little issues could be sorted out. It didn't feel like it was really bad blood. I don't feel like it was like, I agree with you. It felt like there was a bit of friction, but it felt like it was in-game friction. You know what I mean? It wasn't like personal friction, so to speak. And these are sort of things which can kind of be easily handled if they are hungry to win. And acoR, I don't think anyone can deny the guy knows what the fuck he's doing. And for 100 Thieves, X100 Thieves rather, they realize they're kind of starting from scratch right now. Not purely from scratch, but with Bntet coming in and everything, they're like, you know what? We need someone who can really include this Polish superstar into our team. Who better than our old coach who took us to a certain height, which we'd never reach actually prior to him joining us. So for me, it makes sense. Forgetting the weird analogy with the method and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I don't disagree that it makes sense. It's just like
okay. To summarize how I feel about it, I feel like it's like a sequel to an okay movie, and then the sequel's okay, and you're like, okay.
So it's like the new Star Wars movies. It's like,
yeah,
I'm going to see it anyway because it's Star Wars.
A Star Wars movie, you know?
Like, it could be like Evil Dead. Like Evil Dead 1 was a pure horror movie. Evil Dead 2 was horror comedy. Both were great.
Are you just saying that this new Extremum roster is going to be a horror comedy? Because that doesn't sound very nice, Bleh.
Horror comedies are the best, all right? They're fucking amazing. And the third part's the best, in my opinion. I'm just saying, it is a different experiment. I just agree with Pilski here. It is different, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be worse or... I'm going to say it's going to be a little better. I feel like this is a change they needed.
What about the fact that they're, at least from what I can see, being based in Europe now instead of North America? Does that make an impact?
I mean, it makes them a better team, but in terms of like qualifying for things and trying to make it into competitions, oh man, like it makes it so much harder. You look at how they were playing in NA, like they're playing against the previous Cloud9 team. You know, we watch Pro League and we watch, like they're struggling, they're losing to teams that they shouldn't be losing to and things like that. Chuck them in the melting pot of EU. I feel like it's going to be a big struggles, to be honest.
All right, well, I guess we can only wait and see. Obviously, we wish them the best. They're still the number one AU/now Asia team. So I'm quite eager.
How's Pilski the pessimist and I'm the optimist today? Like, what the fuck is going on?
Bntet. Just chuck Bntet and anything, it puts a smile on Bleh's face. That's
2021, new year, new me for both Pilski and for Bleh. I love to see the role reversal. I'll just sit in the middle here as the mediator. All right,
next time I see Bleh at an event, if I ever see with a frown on his face, I'm just gonna have a picture of Bntet in my back pocket, ready to go.
Pull it out. Be like, remember when this guy played?
You don't want to see me masturbating in public, dude.
What the fuck, dude? All right, let's go straight past that one. Beyond disbanding. So maybe this is where you can be a bit more of a pessimist, Bleh. Yes. Now, when I say beyond disbands, the organization has disbanded the Counter-Strike division, I guess. Basically, what the TLDR seems to be is that Beyond no longer wants to be an esports org. They want to be some kind of like gaming media sort of company, something like that. I don't know. They're probably doing fucking influencer shit because that's where all the money is, and they're not doing esports anymore. So, based on the CSGO to Asia article, the team was supposedly trying to stay together, was supposedly fielding offers, but in the last week or so, I have heard rumors that they are moving to Valorant, which, again, you know, obviously wouldn't surprise me at this point. Half of the Asian CS, you know, community has moved to Valorant at this point. But this, I think, is probably the highest profile move since the MVP roster. Like, when MVP went, that was kind of a big deal, I guess. Absolute was kind of a big deal as well, but Japanese CS never really did a whole lot. But this is arguably one of the top 4 teams in the Asia region. They were playing in all the top 4 tournaments in 2020 at the very least. So it's a team that we saw a lot from last year. And if they do move to Valorant, that's bad news. Yeah,
that is pretty rough news. But I kind of saw it coming. I won't lie. Like, and this is something which is very Southeast Asia, right? I don't think Valorant has even really made any inroads into China. If you look at all the Chinese teams, they're still doing their own same old stuff. Mongolia has been untouched as well, right? They still have all those players still sticking around with Counter-Strike, having a grand old time playing all these Chinese events and whatnot. But SCA, it is pretty dry, apart from the RMR events happening and maybe a one-off DreamHack Open, DreamHack Masters qualifier. There's no open qualifiers for the matter. It's only either like Master qualifiers or a few IEMs or some ESL1, usually some ESL1 qualifiers, or the RMR events. There's not much to play for. And earlier, there used to be a lot more local tournaments, a lot of like SCA South Asia-based tournaments as well. But they've dried up because, like you mentioned, most of these teams have moved on to Valorant. So, and yeah, with the org, they're not really making money out of this, right? So I really can't blame them for like completely pivoting into something, like you said, like maybe mobile esports or influencer marketing or whatever. It is unfortunate, though, that beyond they might have to be forced to switch to Valorant, which has been the case with a lot of these teams. There's not much competition. There's nothing to really play for, to be honest. They don't really have, and if you don't have a backing of an org, if you don't get a salary, you got to feed yourself. You got to like get that money, right? So it is unfortunate. It really sucks. I would have loved to see another experiment like NG Esports come up, where they build another mix kind of super team from the remaining players of Asia. I feel there are enough players out there who could be picked up. It doesn't have to be all Thai lineup, but that's also been a problem with the Thai scene, is the fact that they always stick around together as, 5 Thai players. You're just looking on the only outliers are someone like PTC, for example, or Xccurate, who would be willing to, play with other English-speaking Pan-Asian teams. CBBK. But the problem with like CBBK, maybe. That's what I'm saying, like 3 or 4 out of like 20, 25 really, really good players in Thailand. So the moment that this shit happens, they just go as a unit. They play as a unit or they just fall apart. And I feel it's inevitable. It's just unfortunate, right? And I got to say, like, if they'd really played super well, like, if they were beating the likes of a Tai Lu, of like a Vici, of like fucking, I don't know, even Invictus for that matter, regularly, or even the Mongolian super team or NG for that matter, all the NG haven't played. If they'd made a name for being like a top 2, top 3 team, I could see a world where they can get picked up by one of these Chinese orgs, right? You can pitch themselves. They'd be like, hey, listen, I know we're not a Chinese team. We're not whatever, like a mixed team, but we're a Thai team, but we're a top 2, top 3 team, like guaranteed. They were not that. They were still struggling 4th, 5th, losing to teams they should not be losing to, right? In big events like RMR events. So they kind of have themselves to blame to a certain degree, but it's also kind of an unfortunate series of events. So, it is what it is. There's not much I can say about this.
Any 2 cents, Pilski?
I think it just makes sense for any team in like SEA to move to Valorant. It's just a better opportunity at the moment, to be honest. If you're not beating like a lot of the Chinese teams, I mean, I've been working on some Valorant stuff like recently and talking to people who have played in the Asian scene in CS and then gone and played in Valorant, and they're like the support, especially in Japan and Korea, and I'm hoping the same thing will follow in SEA. The support is night and day. Like CS just wasn't supported by orgs. You saw what happened to the Korean scene. This is literally just Korean scene 2.0 is what's happening right now. There is no orgs who are willing to support these teams. So there's not going to be a scene. They're going to go to Valorant where there is actually an opportunity for them to actually be sponsored and have some things to play in and things like that. And that's just the bottom line of what it is. We heard about so many different Korean lineups that were actually like potentially going to happen, and then they were like, well, couldn't find an org, so can't play. So I'm keen. To be honest, the whole of 2020, Beyond did not play well for any of it, really. They really struggled as a team. Individuals who used to be star players weren't playing up to scratch. The whole team was really struggling outside of like STK, who had a couple of good months. But if your star players aren't playing well, then you're not going to be making it anywhere. And the truth is about the Thai scene is I feel like the saying is as true as ever. I feel like everyone in that Sigma lineup is pretty good. A lot of the remnants of that Lucid Dream lineup are pretty good. Even the players on Beyond in a different configuration, maybe in a different team, could be good. You've got Genius as well, you could throw in the mix there. You can still make it, but if they've got nothing to play for, what's the point?
True. It's also, just want to add one more thing, is like, I mean, this is something which if we've all been bitching about for years, but look at what Riot have done. And I'm not like a Riot shell. Like I know like Riot have the problems as well. Like I'm not necessarily a big fan of how they approach certain regions when it comes to how they're, you know, tackling Valorant esports. But overall, it's night and day the way they've tackled Asian Valorant. They haven't just grouped the entirety of Asia saying, oh, this is Asian Valorant, you know, fight it out. No, they've taken care, you know, trying to address the regional disparities, the issues each region has. South Asia, Southeast Asia, Korea, whatnot, although they haven't really touched China yet, but eventually I'm sure they're going to be addressing that. So I feel like that really played a massive role in why all these places transitioned over. Go back a few years to when Counter-Strike was really popping off, right? 2014, 2015, when it was like really exploding. You had all these players in Asia trying to play Counter-Strike, trying to become a professional player. Even back then, even when it had all those teams, they didn't have the support. It was just like, again, purely community-based, purely by the TOs and whatnot. And if Valve had at least put up something, I'm not going to say I have a solution, but, you know, give me like a couple of days, I could come up with some viable idea of how to sustain the scene. And just the fact that it's kind of died out, it just kind of makes me sad. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make excuses for the Asian scene. They've been given enough opportunities in the past four to 5 years to make a mark, right? Barely any of them did. Maybe some of the Koreans, the Chinese guys, obviously, right? We had some glimmers of hope from a couple of players. We had Bntet being the only export coming from the region. But the rest of them, they really didn't perform. And the usual excuse is, yeah, we need to qualify to play. I'm like, just fucking get better, right? They never really changed that. So it's not like I'm trying to make an excuse to them, but at the same time, it does pain me to see how it's kind of just completely just disappeared, just dissipated into nothingness. And I think a lot of the players and the teams have themselves blamed to a certain degree, but also a large chunk of that blame lies with Valve. I wish they did something. They never did anything.
Well, I think this sort of ties pretty well into the next topic, which is Witz stepping down from Bren. Now, it's for the same reasons. He's basically just said he has deliberated over this for a little while, and he feels that he should go to Valorant. And I mean, you can't really blame him at this point. Bren have been at a position where they've been so close in CS, but they're not quite being able to get over the line. And even if they do still have that org support, the question would be, how long is that going to last? Is it something that's going to go throughout the rest of 2021, or are the days numbered for the Counter-Strike in the Philippines region? I mean, it certainly seems like it. Obviously, Bren is the only team that you really see doing anything from the Philippines. I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time talking about this, unless you guys want to sort of reiterate exactly what you've just said. But yeah, Witz steps down from Bren Esports. They do still have a good solid core 5. It still looks like they're going to play Counter-Strike as a team, but just thought we should mention that. If either of you guys have anything to comment on there, feel free to go ahead.
I'll just say, I at least think that some of the players who are playing Valorant or who are Filipino, just from looking at ladder rankings and things like that, and the fact that they're not as far behind in CS as they are in Valorant. Everyone's kind of started more on a level playing field now. They do have some players who are kind of talented, who are kind of up there in terms of the SEA, like leaderboards and things like that. So I think, you know, if they put together, I think it's Bren, it's Bren has a Valorant team as well as a CS team. I don't know if Witz is just going to go from the CS team to the Valorant team. But if this Bren Valorant team puts together a couple more Filipino players who actually have some decent skills, they could put together something a little bit more scary, I feel like, than what the CS team was. Because I feel like the Bren CS team was just in Southeast Asia was just a little bit too far behind. They didn't have the player base that the Thai boys had. They didn't have the experience that the Singapore guys had from earlier on in CS, and then obviously China's a whole nother story. So,
all right. The next topic is NG confirms Xccurate. Wow, what a surprise! This is the worst kept secret in Asian CS history. It feels like everyone knew that Xccurate
you almost. Sorry. Someone we know almost derailed it though. Someone we know.
Look. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. That aside, like, yeah, it's good to see this has finally come together. But I just have to wonder, when the fuck are we actually going to see this NG roster playing in anything? Like, how long has NG Esports actually been a team now? It's been since, like, I don't know, October, November last year, which, yes, granted, it was over the Christmas holiday and there isn't that much Counter-Strike at the end of the year. But, like, where are they in Extremesland, right? They played in that random Thai tournament, like, last year, at the end of last year, where they had to sub in their coach or someone else. I can't remember who played for them. But when do we actually get to see NG Esports playing? You know, this is supposed to be the next Asia Super Team. When the fuck are they actually going to play in anything?
Impression, if you're watching, anyone from NG watching, they should hopefully be able to answer that. I agree with you. Like, this is a team hyped up to be the super team. Honestly, I'm kind of breathing a sigh of relief that Xccurate actually finally managed to join them. Because for a moment there, I won't lie, I felt like that particular thing was going to fall through. I felt like, Xccurate wouldn't be joining. That would have been such a disaster for the team, right? But yeah, I don't know when they're going to be playing. I want to see them play. I still am going to stand by the fact that, yes, the names look pretty. They look very nice on paper. But we've seen this. We've seen Firepower. We've seen all these mixed lineups kind of fall flat on its face multiple times already. So I'm still going to wait. I'm still going to wait and see how they're going to perform. I'm not going to put any hopes on it. I apologize, Impression, Kevin. I love you guys, but I'm a broken man now.
Impression has just said in the Twitch chat that we should wait for the Hyperion OEL tournament, which is the Guam Server Launch that was supposed to actually happen last
delayed
weekend.
Definitely.
It was postponed, actually. So, yeah, a rather unfortunate situation. Probably should have had a bit of a topic about that for this show anyway, but now we're talking about it. What happened there was, I think a cable went down. One of the Hong Kong cables went down. And so they decided to delay their tournament because obviously the whole point of the tournament was to show off the fact that the Guam server could actually be a legitimate staging ground for tournaments. And if there's certain teams that are coming through this cable and they're getting mad ping spikes and whatever, well, they wouldn't be going through the cable, I guess is the point. They'd have to route through something else. Whatever. I don't really know anything about networking. Basically, shit was fucked. And they said, like, okay, we can't do this. I will give credit. They paid us anyway. I didn't work the event, but I got paid for it. I'm hoping to be able to do it anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, but credit for that. So I really appreciate that. But don't know yet. Obviously, I was supposed to cast it. I haven't heard anything as to when it will actually end up happening. But if it is going to end up happening, I will obviously have a chat about it here on Geographically Challenged. And looking forward to seeing that from Impression if they do actually end up playing in that tournament, if that tournament actually ends up going ahead. All right, moving on to Tsogoo and NCL leaving Black Company. Now, Black Company, you might not know who that is. That's the Matsalai roster.
I haven't even watched him play one single game with that roster name.
The what, Black Company or with Matsalai?
No, Black Company.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's a fairly recent change as well. Basically, Matsalai got picked up by this Black Company team, whoever that is, don't know. But Tsogoo and NCL have left. So the report says that they're moving into a new iteration of the Mongols. So that will be quite interesting. I don't think it really matters all that much just from who's going to be the best in Mongolia kind of standpoint or anything like that. Like, I don't think anyone's taking over D13 Tiger at the moment, especially not a new team. But I do almost feel like something is missing from Mongolian Counter-Strike if the name The Mongols is not there. So I do just like to have a team that's called The Mongols. Although the thing is, if you're using the name The Mongols, you almost have to be the best team. Otherwise, you're kind of like besmirching it. It's like MIBR.
True. I agree with you. I would love to see. Listen, there is a team that can deservedly wear the jacket of the Mongols. Bear in mind, if you go back a few years, those jackets are fucking baller, right? D13. You look at Tiger. Pick 5 players from those two teams. You have a super team right there. A team who in my opinion, could potentially take on the likes of a Tyloo, maybe not a Vici, but the likes of a Tyloo, pure firepower wise, right? And it's there. It's just that they don't have an org over there, and it's just the way it is, right? So I would love to see someone who knows what he's doing, able to like pick up these 5 players, put them together, give them a decent salary. Maybe a Chinese org picks them up. Maybe a Chinese org buys the Mongols team name and the logo, whatever. That would be sick. And it pains me looking at the amount of talent in Mongolia that there is no one team that's come on out who's able to field all 5 solid players. You have so many good players out there, but they're all in different teams due to, I don't know, loyalty or whatever. But I'm like, fuck that shit. An org comes in, gives them salary, say, I'm going to pay you more money than any of these motherfuckers. Join me, and then build a fucking sick team out of that. Even without Urcast, I can see a really good team forming there. And definitely. It's just a tragedy that nothing's happened right now. And if it's 2021, it's the beginning of the year, fuck it. Someone do it. Someone do something. I'd love to see that.
I mean, it was Tiger that beat Tyloo last year, right at the end of the year, wasn't it, Pilski? It was Tiger, not the 13.
And at the start of the year.
Yeah. So, like, there's these flashes of brilliance, and I guess, hopefully that continues in 2021 or even improves in 2021. Hopefully Tyloo gets off their ass and actually does something in 2021 as well, because that was such a disappointing end to the year for Tyloo. I don't even know what happened to them at all. But anyway, that's a whole different discussion. We haven't really seen much Counter-Strike from them this year so far, but we will kick their shit in if they play like shit again when we do get onto, Geographically Challenged 25, 26, whatever. We'll move on then to PaperX winning Extremesland. Something positive to start off 2021, at least for PaperX. And obviously Extremesland is like the first tournament that we're going to get to have a look at this year, and so far things are looking pretty good for this PaperX roster. I actually didn't cast any of their games, Pili, so maybe you can talk to this a little bit more so than I can, but to me it actually seemed like a bit of a Benkai and Forsaken show. Like, Benkai, obviously being the IGL for this roster, seems to have now had a bit of a resurgence individually form-wise, and Forsaken is pretty fucking sick. We sort of talked about that, questioned whether or not he could be the guy to save SEACS or whatever. What was your thoughts after actually seeing this roster play and casting some of their games?
I was impressed. I wouldn't say I was blown away. I think like the thing that I was happy with is that they all played reasonably well. They didn't have an easy run in the SEA portion of Extremesland. They played all the other good teams. Like, they had to beat back-to-back tie teams who have had a stranglehold on the SEA region. They had to beat Sigma and then Beyond, or Beyond then Sigma, to win the whole thing. And Sigma were actually playing reasonably well. And like you said, Beyond has played a lot of these top 4 tournaments, even though they were obviously on the way out and were playing particularly well. I was happy with PaperX because when I saw them play, it was very clear that they had a game plan and that they knew what they wanted to do and that they were all on the same page. There was no indecision. The leadership was very solidly there between the coach and the RGL. So I was quite happy with that. I think the thing that will help PaperX sort of step up to the next level, I feel like, is just more practice and also more consistency of the individual firepower, because I see ups and downs from the individual players all over the place from time to time. Like, you'll just see, Forsaken drop a 30 and then have a quiet one, or, and I see like a lot of big performances for Benkai, who's on the IGL duties, who I feel like, you can have your fragging IGLs and stuff, but I didn't see a big map from Devi, even though I've seen him drop a 40 recently. He seemed like he's a little bit inconsistent when he's, in my mind, when he's on his game, one of the top players in Asia. So I think you get more out of Devi, you get him comfortable in that AWP role, and you just sort of get Forsaken a little bit more experience. And I think you've got a very solid roster, because I was actually reasonably impressed with Mindfreak and Tommy. When I've seen Mindfreak play in the past, he's been okay. He's decent, but he's definitely been like a bit of a weak point in the team in the past. It seems like his actual mechanics at the moment are at a pretty decent level. And Tommy had also a big half. So couple that with the fact that their map pool is actually relatively interesting. Like, PaperX is a team that you play a best of 3 against them. They pick like Nuke, Train, and Vertigo as much as possible. Like, they're not fucking around. They don't go like, oh, we'll play Dust 2 Inferno against a Chinese team. Like, they're not keen to play in the middle of the map pool in Asia, which is always going to get you reasonably far, because you're constantly pushing teams who don't usually have strong leadership. I'm not talking about Vici, but a lot of the other teams don't usually have strong leadership, don't usually have a deep map pool, out of their comfort zone, makes it a lot easier to win rather than what we've seen the last couple of years, which is just, let's play Inferno and Dust 2 against Tyloo. What's the worst thing that can happen?
What I will say with their map pool in mind is that, yeah, they like to pick Nuke, but it seems like every time I watch them play Nuke, they seem to lose it. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. Like, it is a map that they obviously don't mind, but they picked Nuke against Beyond in that semi-final. They lost that map, and then I think the second map was Inferno, and I was going into that second map going, shit, here we go again. You know, they're fucked. But they came good. I don't know if there's like a little bit of a caveat over that, because now it seems like Beyond's kind of disbanding, whatever. Like, was that a factor
That's
at all?
what I was saying before, right? Like, Sigma is the team they had to play in the grand final, and Sigma was playing very well. Like, Sigma played against Bren, who weren't playing as good, to be honest. They weren't playing fantastically either, but Sigma were playing very well in that semi-final. Like, they looked on fire. I thought they were going to win. I actually tipped them to win in the grand final against PaperX, but PaperX definitely earned that grand final victory. Like, Sigma was not playing poorly by any stretch.
Got anything here for us, Blair, or should we move on?
The only thing I want to mention here is the fact that it is unfortunate that the rise of PaperX right now is also kind of like coinciding with the fall of Southeast Asian Counter-Strike, right? You're talking about Bren, like, yeah, they beat Bren, but it's Bren who are losing Witz, who are like in a kind of a questionable state right now, beyond losing their roster as well. I'm sure that was in the back of the minds as well. I don't want to take anything away from the win from PaperX, well-deserved win, of course, but at the same time, you know, it's also like, okay, you're winning, but you look at the playing field, look at what competition you really have remaining in Southeast Asia, right? So congratulations on the win. I want to see them play the Chinese teams. I want to see them play the Mongolians, and then I want to kind of form an opinion of where they stand right now.
Agree.
I almost feel like as more time goes on, we are getting further and further away from subdivided regions of Asia. There's just too many of these smaller countries and smaller regions dying at the moment, to where I think you kind of got to lump everyone in Asia for the most part. If you see these SCA qualifiers, you're going to see, like, at the moment, in my opinion, you're going to see Sigma and PaperX speedrun the qualifier.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be a grand final between those two for a spot in a closed qualifier against a bunch of Chinese teams and things like that. So, like I said, I think we're very, very fast approaching the point where Asia is just Asia. It's not SCA and divided up anymore as much.
There was some teams that you don't even know the name of in that tournament, right? There was like, you know, you had Beyond, Bren, PaperX, Sigma, Huatsai. Okay, cool. Like, yep, those seem like pretty okay teams. Then there's Team LZ, never heard of them before. No Money for Haircut, haven't heard of them before. And then a team called August. So I think that really just goes to show the state of SCACS, where you can get 5 quote-unquote teams, and then the other 3 sort of coming through the open qualifiers, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they might be teams, domestically speaking, but they're not teams that are going to push the issue for Southeast Asian Counter-Strike on a global or even a domestic within Asia standpoint.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment. Like, I try not to trash talk teams too much, but there was some teams in that tournament that we watched. Extremesland is meant to be like, this is the Asian tournament. If you're the best from your region, you're playing Extremesland and you're playing against all the other best from Asia. And if you're one of the weaker teams, you know, sometimes we get like a Taiwanese team or something like that, and they'll go out in like the first like round of 16, right? That's Extremesland. And then you get very quickly into the thick of things. There was a team in the SEA portion of this Extremesland who they played T-side Inferno, and on all of their gun rounds, they did not buy grenades.
I remember, like this, yeah, anyway. I don't want to get too far
Was
into
it
that.
Tyloo smurfing?
It definitely wasn't Tyloo smurfing.
It wasn't Tyloo smurfing. But they just force-bought Scout armor and AK armors and force-bought Deagles and things like that. They just did not have a plan.
Yeah. So, obviously, maybe in the future they will. But definitely dire straits for SCA. Still, it's good to see for PaperX, but I want to reserve my judgment for when we get to see them play against the Mongolians, when we get to see them play against the Chinese teams, and maybe even, you know, a little bit more against the likes of Sigma. Obviously, probably not going to see them against Beyond anymore, but anyway, that is what it is. Speaking of Extremesland, just want to give a quick shout out to the upcoming events as we start to wind the podcast down. Got some viewer questions before we do go. So if you have any, by the way, any viewer questions for those of you in chat, We're getting to about that time, so feel free to write them down and I'll pull them up. 22nd to 24th is East Asia for the Extremesland Festival 2020. Now, this one I think is actually going to be the best region. I guess maybe you could make the argument that Oceania could be, but East Asia has some pretty good teams. Lin Vision, Tiger, Wings Up, After Gaming, which is Ronan Baby's new team, if you remember. He was playing on Huatsai, and he was doing a very good job in that team, so I'm quite excited to see him in this new Chinese team. Whether or not he's going to be able to do it.
He was doing interesting things. That's not say a very good job.
Well, he was fragging. Let's just say that much. Right. Has Checkmate D13, Black Company, and Unico Esports, which is Ayaya, Schwaderpai, and Aeon. So again, you know, a few names we've heard around. I think that'll be the best region for Extremesland. So for me, that's the one I think you should be tuning into.
For sure.
Starts tomorrow, goes until Sunday. So that'll be quite a good one. Next weekend, 29th to 31st, is the South Asia region. Now, these are your boys, Bleh. A lot of teams from India. I have to say the field doesn't look quite as strong. Too Easy Gaming, Blaze Esports, Reckoning Esports, and Wicked Gaming are the names to speak to. I think the open qualifiers haven't quite gone through just yet, but
I'm saying Blaze would be kind of like the favorites here. Yeah, hands down. It's just unfortunate, right? Like all the better Indian teams, the South Asian teams, everyone's moved on to Valorant, where they're doing very good for themselves. I'm happy for them. But at the same time, you know, it hurts me. Shout out to Blaze and these guys for still sticking around with Counter-Strike, though. Considering the lack of events and everything, the fact that they're still sticking with CS, you know, respect.
Indeed. All right, let's jump into the viewer questions. The first one was from Inz. He was in the chat earlier, Pilski. He wants to know how your Valorant career is going.
I don't really want to talk about it, man. Like, I'm actually molding, right? I got my Radiant my Radiant Triangle Dorito thingy, you know, and now they've reset all the ranks, and
that's how it works.
Okay, they reset the ranks, but they didn't reset people's hidden MMR. So I'm at Diamond 2, and I'm playing some of the good players in Australia, and I'm Diamond 2, and I'm playing against Radiants, and you know, I win some, I lose some, I stay around the same MMR. And then old mate in the hidden MMR system down here is also Diamond 2 somehow. And he's playing against all these players. And he's gone straight up to Radiant. And I'm stuck at fucking Diamond 2 because I keep queuing into people who are very good and getting my head shot off. So
just get better, dude.
So yeah, what I want to know is, are you taking Inz's MMR or ELO, or is he taking your ELO?
I think I only played on the same team as Inz one game, okay? And this is Valorant in a nutshell.
Okay.
All right. Valorant is a game with, in terms of mechanics, with like a middling skill ceiling. Like you see pro players on stream lose to randoms all the time. Okay. Here was my team. I had like Inz. I had a guy who played for Avant. I had Frøg, who plays for Legacy. I had like another reasonably like good player, like a pro player who came like top 8 round of Valor, and it was me. And we played against one decent player on the other team and like 4 other guys I've never heard of. Do you think we won?
Guess not.
You lost, didn't you?
Of course we lost. They were all like, wow, look at this team. This is going to be easy, ELO. And of course we fucking lost. I was like, no, I called it right from the start of the game. We're not going to lose. We are going to lose, rather. Although I do remember Inz flying around on Raze and he got an ace. And, you know, he's already better at Valorant than I am when I've probably played like hundreds of hours, and he's probably just logged onto his PC and installed it that day. So what can you fucking do? Some people are just genetically gifted.
Yeah, he's also much more handsome than you are as well. But anyway, that moves into the final question that we got from Frøg with Danish O, who is one of the OG viewers, actually, I think, of Geographically Challenged. He was someone that I chatted with sometimes on Twitter. So nice to see you in the chat there, Frøg. Is Asian CS worse off than NACS right now? All the commotion in 2020. Small orgs have picked up rosters in NA. ESCA made changes to promote ESCA Premier, etc. But it sort of feels like Asia was left out of the discussion with almost as many teams and players switching to Valorant. Now, it's a hard thing to say, right? Because I think there was a period there toward the end of last year where I almost felt like Asian CS was in a better place than NACS. Like, so many NA teams were just dropping off. All of the good ones were going to EU. I was thinking, fuck, this is actually pretty dire. But I think when you look at it just from that perspective of what teams are disappearing and who's complaining the most, etc., etc., there was certainly a lot of noise being made in North America. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot more money there and still a lot more infrastructure there than what there is or has ever been in Asia. So I have to say, yes, I think Asian CS is worse off than NACS. And look, it's not a surprise that Asia CS has been forgotten about with respect to this ESEA stuff, etc., etc. There has been, throughout 2020, there was a big shift from, particularly from ESL, obviously. They're the main tournament operator when it comes to Counter-Strike, especially in the Asia and ANZ region. But with the way that Pro League was going and the way that a lot of the qualifiers for international tournaments were going, it was made a lot more difficult for Asian teams in particular. Not so much for ANZ teams. I feel like ANZ was able to sort of hang out and be okay. But I think Asian CS lost a lot of opportunities, mostly from the ESL Pro League stuff. Because if you remember, we used to have, there was the North America division, there was the EU division, there was the Asia division, which also included ANZ. And you would have up to like 12 teams or 16 teams even, I think, from Asia at some points. Like there was 4 groups of 4 or maybe...
Groups of 4.
Yeah, 3 groups of 4 at some points.
2 in Asia, 2 in ANZ.
Right, so there was 16 teams from Asia, including ANZ.
18.
And things were going fucking awesome then, but they scaled things back, and then it became double elim brackets that qualified you for ESL Pro League, the actual tournament, which, you know, obviously we know all sort of started to fall apart because of COVID. But I mean, it seems like, yeah, okay, like we get the token invite or we get the token qualification spot to say, hey, you still exist, but that may be well and good for the likes of Renegades and for the likes of maybe Vici or Tyloo or whichever team takes it from Asia. But for the rest of the ecosystem, that doesn't leave them with a lot to play with when there isn't that presence from ESL. So for ANZ, it's okay. We have ANZ champs, you know, so there is that to hold up the ecosystem. There's tournaments like LPL as well, so there are other things to play in, but you don't quite get so much of that in Asia unless you're in China and you're focusing on those Chinese tournaments. And then obviously that's outside of the sphere of ESL's influence. So I think, you know, it's hard to blame ESL in a way because, like, how are they going to monetize Asia? How are they going to monetize ANZ? They're just such small regions. So from that business standpoint, you just got to say, like, okay, fine, whatever. But from the perspective of a CS fan and someone that works in this region, someone that wants to watch Counter-Strike in this region and enjoys casting Counter-Strike in this region, obviously it's disappointing.
Yeah, I hope that Blast comes through and like fills some of that void because they did say that they're going to be doing some stuff in Oceania and Asia this year. So that's like a reasonable plus. And to be honest, if I'm going to be excited about ESEA having Asia stuff and Blast having Asia stuff, I'm going to be a little bit more excited about Blast coming into the space because I've seen what ESEA has been doing. It's not fun. Like, it's not exciting. The players don't even enjoy it most of the time. We're literally just bashing our head into ESEA MDL every freaking season. People are playing best of ones against each other. Some of the time they just forfeit them because they don't even give a shit. They're already gotten like up into the top 8 for the playoffs or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's not fun games for anyone. It's not fun for the players. It's not fun for the bettors who bet on a best of one online Counter-Strike and wonder why they can't eat dinner. Like, you know, it's fucked, man. I just want to see. I didn't mind what DreamHack did last year, to be honest, and I'm keen to see if they're going to keep that up or whether they're just going to pull out next year. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, like the ESEA leagues in Asia have left a lot to be desired for. The ESEA MDL league in Oceania is something that no one's excited for, like literally no one.
Just gotta add as well, like when it comes to the NA scene, like, you know, the entire them struggling and whatnot, I feel it was blown a little bit out of proportion, I won't lie, right? Like you still had Liquid and EG and the likes, you know, who were traveling in EU and whatnot, right? Heck, man, like if we had Tyloo and Vici being able to compete with top 10 teams regularly, we'd call the Asian CSC a success. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think the point was that they were moving away from NA.
Okay, so there's nothing remaining back. I see that, but I feel like the majority of players who moved on to Valorant were the guys who were really kind of stagnating. You know what I mean? They were not that great. Let's be real. Many of them were shitters. Some of them are playing like shitty teams and like lower tiers of MDL and whatnot. It is tragic what happened to the Chaos guys. I won't lie. I really like them. I feel like they were a team who could have done a lot of damage. So yes, there were a few casualties. Who I would love to have stuck around with Counter-Strike. But like Frøg mentioned, if you look at the changes the ESC have made and whatnot, they're already trying to get the scene back together, right? So I don't fear for the NA scene. I won't lie. They've been through way worse. The Asian scene, though, it I hate to be the naysayer, man, but ever since the advent of CS:GO, ever since like the death of 1.6, we haven't really seen anything. Like nothing's really changed, right? And it's hard to. It's a very, very tricky market to get into, where if you don't have the backing of, and this is where even I get confused myself, because I'm someone who actually kind of likes Valve's hands-off approach to how Counter-Strike is overall, right? But at the same time, I feel like Valve is the only company who could really go for a push here when it comes to Asia. Because trust me, initially you're going to lose a lot of money, man. And ESL and all these guys, like you mentioned, I don't blame them for kind of like washing the hands off the Asian region, because it's a very confusing region to really monetize and make it click. And unfortunately, unless you have the publisher's support, where they're willing to sink in a few $1 million just to kind of like enable the scene to grow and eventually be that golden fish. Or that golden swan or goose or whatever, the golden goose, whatever. Like, only a publisher can do that. Only Valve can probably do that. And no one else is, and if they don't do that, why the fuck would these guys? I don't really want to blame them. So, yeah, is the Asian scene worse off than NA? Abso-fucking-lutely. And this goes, here's the thing, bold statement. Even if Valorant wasn't a thing, even if Valorant never existed, Asian CS would probably be pretty much at the same fuck all level it is right now. Maybe a couple of teams would still be around, but that's about it. Valorant didn't really make a big difference. In fact, I feel Valorant was a good thing, so some of these players and teams could at least go on to a scene where they can make some money out of it, kind of make a name for themselves. Yeah. So Valorant is the best thing to have happened to FPS professionals and players in the region.
I totally agree. Yeah, like initially I was pretty skeptical about Valorant, and I wasn't happy about how many people were switching over. But upon reflection, like I'm honestly a pretty big fan of Valorant, because I'm happy that I'm seeing so many of the players that struggled in Asian CS actually having a fair go and giving something a crack. So yeah, I would totally agree with that.
At this point, Geographically Challenged might as well be an Asian CS/Valorant podcast, with the amount that we actually do talk about Valorant. But anyway, maybe that's something for future episodes. Just to wind things back, I know we're going to close things up pretty shortly. I think with regard to the DreamHack thing that you mentioned, Pilski, I believe the reason that we actually had those tournaments was because the actual DreamHacks weren't going ahead. So if the DreamHacks, internationally, those actual events start to come back, we will very likely lose the events that we had throughout 2020, which I agree were great. Obviously, the one complaint was that they were all top 4 tournaments, but I'd rather have that than nothing.
I just kind of wonder what they're going to do with it, though. Like, are they going to bother broadcasting it? Are they just going to, like, it's about level of commitment, in terms of broadcasting. It says a lot of things. I'm wondering whether they're going to just go back to all right, we'll chuck a qualifier, we'll pay old mate $150 to do a bedroom cast, and that's our level of commitment, or whether they're going to keep on with the same level that they had last year, where we had studio casts, we had a pretty decent commitment for DreamHack. In fact, they kept a lot of those ANZ and Asian players playing last year.
Yeah, definitely. And from what I know as well, by the way, with the merger between ESL and DreamHack, which went down last year, I think the Australian contingent of ESL has a little bit more of a say in DreamHack matters in this region. So I think that's good news, at least for us and for the players within the ANZ region. So yeah, there's that as well, I guess. And just, again, I had another point regarding the ESL tournaments and how it's difficult to sort of monetize the region. You got to think about it from the perspective of Chinese audiences want one thing, Mongolian audiences want one thing, Thai audiences want one thing, and then the English-speaking audience wants another thing. So you can't, you get your sponsor and you might be targeting you can't just target Asia. You can't just target ANZ because there are so many different cultures, so many different ecosystems within that whichever sponsor you have on board might not be directly speaking to the people that it
There isn't even like an Asian office. You know what I mean? There isn't one Asian office. It's always like, if you speak to sponsors, you're like, oh yeah, you got to deal with the Indian office. You got to deal with the Singaporean office or something like that. It's so hard, man, for TOs. I've done that shit. I'm like, yeah, never again. Yeah. Fuck that.
Anyway, so that's the end of the episode. Friction has the question, Elfishguy, will you do Valorant casting in the future? Look, I don't know. I can't say. I haven't got anything immediately planned. But I would like to if the opportunity does present itself. But so far, there isn't a whole lot for me to do. So maybe something will come along in 2021. I'd definitely be eager to pick it up. And I'm sure both Pilski and Bleh would be as well. So let's jump into shout-outs. Benkai wanted a shout-out from you, Pilski. So please be my guest.
All right. Shout out to Benkai. He does deserve it. I'll give him that. Okay. He beat Sigma. That's pretty hard. He won SEA Extremesland. He IGL'd this Paper X team and actually dropped some pretty big numbers. So if you can do that against the Chinese teams, I'll buy you dinner.
Ooh, he's going to buy you dinner. If in some world we do make it to Singapore, which would be really cool. I've never actually been to Singapore. Also, shout out to Benkai's Instagram. He just started a new Instagram. If you didn't see on Twitter, Pilski, it's eggs_Benkai. So you should go follow that one.
Eggs.
I don't know. He's changed his name on Twitch to Eggs Benkai as well. You can see him in the chat pogging, which, by the way, you can vouch for me here, Bleh. I did say that pog actually looks like Benkai as well. So
It does. It does. It kind of looks like Crazy Guy meets Benkai and is swallowing an egg.
It all works. It all fits together. Any shout outs from you, Bleh? Otherwise,
yeah, I mean, shout outs like I'm happy we're back. You know, it's been a while. Geographically Challenged. I feel like it's going to be some very interesting things we're going to be talking about over the next few months. Apart from that, as usual, hire us, you cunts. We do Counter-Strike. We do other esports titles as well. Maybe even Valorant, cartoon game. Ha ha ha. Yeah, hire us, you cunts.
Yeah, we'll do anything. And we definitely won't say cunts on your official broadcast. We only do that on this show. We're much more professional than that. I will give a quick shout out to Grovey J and War Machine 27. Thank you for the subs today. The first 2 subs from Geographically Challenged on Twitch. Now, I would love it if anyone here in Twitch hasn't followed me on YouTube. You should go and do that as well. That would help me out. Also, for those of you watching on YouTube, follow me on Twitch, where we do stream this live. And you can also support me on Patreon, patreon.com/Elfishguy. Follow us all on Twitter. Do all of those things.
How much money have you made on Patreon so far?
$50.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, beers are on me when we do eventually get to a LAN. When that may be.
In New Zealand?
I don't know.
Hopefully, I'm not going to go for New Zealand. I'm going to go hopefully in Asia, because $50 of beers in Asia is a lot more than $50 of beer in New Zealand.
We might actually die with $50 of beer.
That will be 25 beers basically in China with the exchange. Anyway, we're gonna close things there. Also, no, before we do close things, speaking of beers, we do want an alcohol sponsor. If you're an alcohol sponsor, hit us up. We'd love it. You know, whiskey, beer, alcohol, gin, anything. We're happy with that. It will improve the quality of this show as well, astronomically. I can say that much. But that is the end of the show. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 24 of Geographically Challenged, and we'll see you next time.
Wasting time.